This video is sponsored by Squarespace.
Oh.
Gail is a therapist played by Catherine O'Hara from Season 2 of The Last of Us. I am a therapist played by myself in Season 29 of my life. Today we are breaking down the therapy as depicted in The Last of Us, not just to judge it, also to analyse what we can learn from it, what it says about the characters and the themes of the show itself. But yes, I think Gail is not very good at her job.
Well, you really are doing good.
Now, I've made videos on every episode of this show, and in those videos I've been pretty positive about Gail as a character. I think Catherine O'Hara does a fantastic job in the role. I think she is perfect casting. I think it's such a fun part as well. The only therapist in a community trying her best to make herself useful in a post-apocalyptic world, if we can call it that. She is obviously a mess. She has no supervisor. She is likely traumatized herself. It's also very hard to maintain boundaries and privacy in Jackson when you're literally the only therapist and everyone knows who you are. Was she ever going to be a shining beacon of ethical, well-facilitated therapy? No. I don't know how she could possibly do her job in this environment without at least some problems. And I do find that struggle really interesting. It's a fun kind of semi-moral dilemma, I suppose, of do I try and give therapy in a really difficult environment knowing it's going to be flawed, or do I refuse to try it at all because it's going to be flawed? I think it's fun to watch her in this show, and I think my enjoyment of the character from a place of fiction has led some of you in the comments to conclude that I think she's good at her job and that this is a good representation of therapy. No. Let's begin at the beginning, which is with the first session with Joel. Then we're going to go through everything together. So the first thing is the room, and it's hard to be too critical on this point because I can't imagine Maria's going to listen much if Gail said, hey, can you give me a separate building for the therapy? I know you're already pressed trying to build homes for everyone to live in, but I want another one to do therapy in. That's not going to happen. She has to use her own home, and often that is the case in private therapy. It's not ideal, but if you can make sure the room feels therapeutic and welcoming and it doesn't reveal too much about your own life, isn't provocative in any kind of way, that's okay. I'm bringing it up because it's interesting to watch Joel spot the two different pairs of shoes left out. This pair is clearly Eugene's, and then he observes a painting where there's one rider on a horse and the other horse is empty. Both of those, I think, whether intentional or not in terms of the painting, are expressing something about the loss of her husband, Eugene, that Joel killed. And when you come into a space to be vulnerable and open with your therapist, these aren't first great indicators. If I was Gail, I would be taking care to move Eugene's shoes out of the way before Joel's sessions began, and I would also definitely not arrange the chairs like this. I mean, look at that. They're so close together. It's so head on. That can feel really confrontational. And I've said this point in a lot of videos. Pop the sofa back a bit, angle the chairs slightly so it feels less like you're staring straight at them, putting them under this kind of spotlight. Add an extra chair as well in case they want a choice of seating. Apart from that, the room itself is fine. It's got a warm enough feel, it's an inoffensive environment, the door is easy for Joel to get to, that's also very good. Sometimes the clients just want to know where the door is and that it's close. They may never want to bolt out of the room or anything, but it just feels safer to know how easily they could.
You want anything to drink?
What do you have?
Whiskey? Herbal tea?
So table-wise, ideally you'd already have some water set out and probably a box of tissues or whatever the Jackson community equivalent might be if they're running low. Some people might find the sight of a tissue box in a therapy room like pressure, that they're supposed to cry, but you still might need them at hand. I think tea and coffee as well as drinks can be fine. I think you ask them for future notice what they would like so that you can make that drink in advance of their session and have it on the table ready so you don't have to waste time with that. You can just start the session. Whiskey, however, I don't think is a good idea, especially not when the therapist herself is drinking some. I don't think I need to explain why it's a bad idea for the therapist to be drinking during work. It's alcohol. They need to be sharp and alert, not brash and unfiltered. I also don't like the alarm clock at all. I mean, I imagine a lot of this stuff sounds very minor nitpicking at the moment. We are going to get onto bigger stuff, but yeah, do not set an alarm like that for session time. The consistency you have for the 50-minute sessions you set out, or sometimes 60 minutes, are very important. Maintaining the boundary around that time is very important, but you do it yourself. An alarm is so cold and impersonal, especially when you're sitting there winding it up in front of them and letting it tick. You know, how's that supposed to feel? It's like a hurry up you only have this much time, then I want you gone. I think it makes you feel rushed. I don't think you feel at all valued, and that's hardly going to make you want to open up. I can remember I once had a seminar all about time when I was in training, and I did bring up the fact that one of my old counsellors when I was young used to set an alarm on her phone for the sessions, and everyone in the room was like, "Ugh," when I said it. And it was true for me then as well. I felt rushed by it. I felt undervalued. Here's what you generally do. Have 2 clocks in the room. Ideally ones that don't tick, although some people do find ticking clocks really comforting, but 2 different clocks so that it's easy for both you and the clients to glance at the time whenever they want to. You don't want to have to be yanking your head around to turn and stare at it, because the more you're obviously looking at the clock, the more they'll feel like you're getting fed up with them, you want them gone, you're bored by the session. So just have a few clocks that either of you can easily glance at to keep a track of the time, and you inform them when there's 10 minutes left, and then 5, and then when you have to finish. And you take care to keep aware of those times. If needed, you can explain to them as well why you give the 10 and 5 minute warnings. It's not because I want you to stop or I'm trying to hurry you, it's because I know it can feel very abrupt and sudden if I spring the end of a session on you out of nowhere. It's to let you know it's coming so that when it does end, you can feel ready for the session to end. It's good in general to remember that most clients won't really know how therapy works or entirely what it is. Sometimes they do need a bit of guidance first to be able to make the most of the sessions. In the same way, someone wanting to make the most of their online business or presence might need the right platform to help them do so. Yep, this video is sponsored by Squarespace, the best space to stand out online with an all-in-one service, be that claiming a domain name, building and then growing a website, getting paid, all on the same platform. A very well-designed platform, I should add, a very smooth system. I can genuinely remember trying to build a blog when I was a lot younger, and understanding how to do anything was a nightmare, but look at this. Just move these blocks around on a simple grid, resize, realign everything, change the colours, add pictures and texts and all sorts of different elements to suit your needs. Maybe it's because I'm not tech savvy, but I was actually blown away by how easy it is to customise a contact form. Let's say I want to eventually start a website for selling all my writing and offering editing services. Funnily enough, that is what I want to do. We can split that into 2 distinct pages on the site though. One where I can explain what I offer editing wise, and then we can make a shop page for my soon to be finished poetry book and some of my older stories and whatever else you might fancy. What you're seeing here is obviously a work in progress, but all of this footage was just me screen recording the first 30 minutes from the moment I signed up without even looking at the tutorials. That's how intuitive I find Squarespace. So if you want the best domain name at an all-inclusive price, if you want integrated SEO tools, if you want a giant scrolling list of all the things Squarespace offer, then click the link in the description or pinned comment to get a free trial to Squarespace. And if that suits you nicely, then use the code MyLittleThoughtTree to get 10% off purchasing your first domain or website, Squarespace.
Shaken stems. What am I, in high school?
For Gail, she is paid in weed, or at least that's what Joel pays her. I'm not going to nitpick about the Jackson trading system, or even payment in general, I think. You know, I don't think throwing it down and counting it out at the beginning of a session is the best way to do this, but I've also never had to charge my clients, so I'm not going to get judgy on this point. I've always either worked in schools where it's free for the children and the school budget pays me, or as part of a clinic funded by the local council to provide free therapy to people who need it that wouldn't be able to afford it. I'm not an expert on that point. What we do know though is that this moment isn't really about the payment. It's about Gail's underlying resentments and desire to get a dig in. She criticises the weed precisely because Eugene used to supply it, her husband that Joel killed.
I never stopped Eugene. January, February, the man would grow buds the size of pine cones. And no, we're not allowed to drink in these things, but I woke up this morning feeling sad. It's my first birthday without my husband.
Again, this is another little dig, but even if it wasn't, even if Joel has nothing to do with Eugene's death and no reason to feel guilty around that, this time is Joel's time for his feelings. And here you are taking it up with your own, telling him you're feeling sad, potentially making him feel guilty. As a kind of, well, does she even want to see me today? Should I be here at all? Is she telling me this as a kind of complaint? Oh, I'm feeling sad, I wish I didn't have to deal with you today, Joel. In many ways, this is at the core of this therapy session. This whole scene is Gail feeling, I cannot be bothered with you today, Joel. You and your complaints about Ellie, that trouble is nothing compared to my feelings. I lost my husband. Which I don't think is literally what she thinks, but I think it's that kind of feeling. The therapist needs the client to feel valued, to feel that they can trust you and rely on you, and that this is your space to be as open as you need to be. But right now, it's not that for Joel. And when this comment leaves Joel feeling understandably unsure what to say, a bit taken aback, Gail has the gall to then rush him. What the hell is that? You know, I don't think I even need to explain this one, especially not when leaving space for silences are often important in the work. That's not a good thing to do. And while I'm at it, I personally don't like her holding a notebook either to make notes. I think in specific settings, having a notebook there can be okay. If this was a first session or assessment or there's something particular to do, even then it's not the worst thing in the world, regardless. But generally, I think you take all the notes after the session. Do that once the session is finished, and then you read up on them again later, talk with a supervisor about them, which of course Gail doesn't have. And I always like to at least give myself 10 minutes before a session to skim back through the notes of the last session to make sure I'm refreshed. Normally I give myself longer than that, but sometimes it's difficulties in terms of time. The danger of taking notes during the session is that it can make you feel less human and more kind of scientific. It means you can be less 100% present with them in this session because half your brain is now focused on what you're writing and trying to do that, having to look down at your paper, when really you want to be giving all of them your full attention. So Joel then opens up about Ellie, and there's a few interesting points in this. The two I'm going to highlight are that, first, Joel's confusion between Ellie and Dina as his daughter. There's a side of him here fantasizing about Dina as his daughter there, because Dina is kinder to him. That's an interesting avenue to explore.
That one treats me like a human being. See, Dina understands me. Like she's my kid or something. But she's not.
Maybe opens the door for discussing what being a father means for Joel, what he thinks it should mean. What is it in his relationship to each of these girls that does make things different between them? And secondly, there's Joel's repeated assertion that I am a good guy.
I see her around town, gives me a nod like I'm a stranger or some asshole. Now that one gives me a smile. Looks up to me, makes me feel like I'm a good guy, which I am.
And I think this is the core of what he's saying in all of this monologue here, that I am a good person and I don't deserve to be seen and treated as a bad guy. And is that not an interesting thing for Joel to be asserting, not just in the context of what he did at Salt Lake, but saying it to Gail? So much of the work is done through your relationship to the client, and there is a big thing in the relationship here that we're obviously going to come back to in a moment. It's just enough for the second to point out that Joel isn't oblivious to this. He knows there is an elephant in the room between him and Gail. He likely picked up on her digs already, and he is potentially being a little defensive right now because of it. Joel is talking about Ellie, but he's also talking about Gail. Joel is talking about Dina treating him with empathy, but he's also asking Gail to treat him with empathy, which is quite a lot of conjecture admittedly on my part, but I think I'm kind of right there. Right or not, it's something you could engage with and ask questions about and see if that's the case, but Gail's response engages with none of this stuff, opens no doors for exploring further, just sort of shuts him down with a little unnecessary jab.
Like she's my kid or something, but she's not.
Neither is Ellie.
Like, what is the purpose of pointing that out, that Ellie isn't literally Joel's daughter? I don't know where she's going with that, what it's supposed to achieve. There's nothing bigger they're reflecting on with that idea. As a result, it just feels like a kind of rude thing to be saying, and, like, no, Ellie isn't literally his daughter, but she also kind of is. Joel has been her father figure. He has played that role, as we see all too well in episode 6. Their relationship is largely one of a father and daughter. What is shooting that idea down supposed to achieve here? Gail then puts her book down, which now feels like a very deliberate gesture of I'm not going to listen to you now, and she launches into a rant.
Oh, 19-year-old daughter. She's acting toward me like every 19-year-old daughter has ever acted toward their dad, ever.
That's so condescending. Putting on a bit of a whiny voice, like Joel's feelings are pathetic, like they don't matter. This is a genuinely horrible thing for her to be doing here. It's a very rude thing in most circumstances, but especially therapy. You come there to open up. You're in a more vulnerable space. You're supposed to be sharing your feelings, and someone there tossing them aside in that space, it's like 20 times more painful as a result. This kind of experience could be really damaging for Joel, ever opening up again, ever wanting therapy again, ever just taking his own feelings seriously. If even a professional therapist who's supposed to deal with feelings minimises your feelings, then it is going to be very hard for you not to bottle them up. And fair play to Joel that he does stand up for himself here.
Aren't you supposed to be validating me or something?
Oh, yeah, actually I am.
I mean, validating isn't the only thing you do in the work. Sometimes you do need to interpret or to challenge them, but you've got to be very careful about how you do that and to make sure it doesn't result in invalidating them. Gail is clearly drunk. I love her acting here. You can see her brain turning in every moment. She knows Joel has been lying to her and she's essentially calling him out on it.
Actually I am. But I'm not going to do it anymore because you're lying to me. I've done this long enough to know when somebody is leaving something out.
And on the one hand, she's exactly right. Joel is leaving something out, and whatever that is a very important thing. But on the other hand, maybe he's leaving it out for a reason. That's always a good thing to consider when you realise a client is lying to you about something. Why do they feel the need to lie about this? And metaphorically grabbing them by the scruff of their neck and demanding they open up is unlikely to be the solution. People have defences for a reason, an important and crucial reason. You do not just knock them down. Also, this is only the 5th session. Who feels comfortable enough to reveal something as big as this after just 5 sessions, especially when she's hardly been the heights of non-judgmental empathy? Plus, in a community like Jackson where everyone knows everyone, can you really trust she'll keep secrets? That's got to feel hard in that situation. If Joel is leaving something out, that's fine. Give it time. See if there are other ways to do the work, and if it really does get to the point where you feel you really need to challenge them on this idea, then there are so many softer, more tactful ways to do it. You know, this is quite an obvious point when I spell it out, really. Instead of mocking Joel's feelings about Ellie and telling him to kind of grow up and reveal the thing he's really holding back, why not instead just zero in on what Joel was really saying? What it was expressing beneath the layer of ordinary teenage daughter grumblings? This feeling around being a good person? Because there's a lot you can do there, which might open up a more acceptable space to talk about Salt Lake later down the line, or else do similar work without actually having to discuss it all specifically. This is something I don't think the general stereotypes of therapy often realise. It's not about the therapist being right and having a good point. Gail is correct that Joel is hiding something, but so what, you know? How does pointing that out help anything? I don't think this is the right circumstance to be doing that, and I think Gail knows this isn't the focus for the work right now, but it is the focus for her personally because she's angry with Joel.
I'll just come back another day.
Should I say it out loud? Yeah, I should.
Again, in a lot of ways, she makes a point that is technically correct.
Can't heal something unless you're brave enough to say it out loud.
Well, technically I think you can, but I mean, it can help to heal. So in a way she's right, and there is an elephant in the room here. There is a problem in their relationship that Joel has alluded to as well. Both of them know it's there. It does 100% need resolving if the therapy is going to work properly between them. Otherwise, Joel will forever hold something back. And I don't just mean lying or keeping secrets, but I mean emotionally and and reflectively holding back. How are you ever going to really explore your feelings 100% when you've got half a mind wondering if your therapist hates you, you know? The thing Gail says is, of course, this.
You shot and killed my husband, and I resent you for it. Maybe a little more than that. I hate you for it.
And there's quite a lot more she says there as well, but in many ways, this whole discussion is a moot point, because I find it very hard to believe any circumstance where you should be giving therapy to a person that murdered your husband. I can't see how that's ever going to work. I don't think she should have taken on Joel as a client, because that kind of deep personal resentment she's feeling here, floating in the air, is going to make it so easy to end up hurting Joel rather than providing helpful therapy. And consciously, she might not want to hurt him at all. I don't think she consciously wants to hurt him here, but it's still happening because of these feelings. And I don't know how this work began. I imagine Joel came to her and asked for therapy. I think I probably would have given one session to talk about why going forwards would be such a problem and why it wouldn't work. To talk about this at the very beginning. You shot and killed my husband, and I want to forgive you for that, but I don't feel I'm able to, or I don't feel I'm yet able to, and I don't want to take you on as a client if my feelings around Eugene just leads things down a path of hurting you. I think you just have to be absolutely honest about that from the very beginning. Maybe there's then a discussion that can come out of that would then lead to the work becoming possible. Maybe. But even then, one, you cannot spring this upon them suddenly in the middle of session 5. 2, to be so forceful with what you're saying here. Like, you could just say, I've struggled to forgive you and I think it makes the work difficult. You don't need to say you outright despise him. 3, perhaps the worst of all, she wraps the whole thing in some kind of moralising coat of offering an important lesson here. But let's look at how she does that. Firstly, she has this build up to her sharing her feelings, which is either drunk talking aloud or there's something weirdly performative about this.
I'm scared, though. I'm scared to say it. Which is why I have to.
And then she makes this the point. She admits she resents him, and then she says, I've said the thing I was scared to say, and I feel better as a result. Now it's your turn to say the thing.
I'm ashamed, but it's in the air. And now maybe there's a chance I can make things right with you. Your turn. Say the thing you're afraid to say.
No. You can't just tell your client you hate them and then move on. Leave them no space to respond to that. For you to justify it like you're teaching them something positive here? No. That's actually quite a sinister thing to do, I think. You're hurting your client out of personal resentment and using therapy to not just justify but weaponize it.
And looking at your face, sitting in our home, makes me so fucking angry.
To be honest, I find it really hard knowing what we now know of Eugene's death from episode 6. How the hell did they ever start therapy without discussing this before? Like, how do you not mention it at the beginning when their fallout was so blatant between the two of them? And now the thing I said in my episode 1 video was that thematically I like this moment, and again from a literary point of view, Gail is absolutely correct.
And now maybe there's a chance I can make things right with you.
Joel needs to say the thing he's afraid to say to Ellie. And even more so, Ellie needs to tell him outright how fucking angry she is. She needs to let that out in order that they can start to heal. I haven't played the second game, but I was right back then in episode 1 to suggest that this moment is kind of foreshadowing for what Ellie needs to say to him. And thankfully, she does say it to him on the porch. And it was supposed to be the beginning of them moving forwards, had Abby not. Yeah. So again, Gail is technically right, but she's also not Ellie. She's in the role of a therapist here. What Ellie needs to personally do in order for her to heal is not okay for a therapist to do to their client. If Gail really felt the need to say all of this stuff, then she shouldn't have taken him on. It's a really interesting, well-written scene, but it is very harmful therapy, and of course it fails. Of course Joel storms off, now feeling more hurt and defensive than before. I suspect had Joel lived, he wouldn't have come back to therapy at all. That this would be it. A terrible experience that not only puts him off therapy, but maybe puts him off trying to move forwards altogether. Gail is a skilled therapist with a keen eye, but she is weaponizing all of that for her own personal desires here, and it's awful. I hate it. I hope people do understand this is not what therapy is or should be like in reality. There are 2 other Gail scenes I want to quickly touch on though. I think Gail's a bit better here. It's kind of a half-assed attempt at what I guess is meant to be an assessment of Ellie. It's a very bad assessment, and obviously she achieves nothing here, and I really don't like her just revealing stuff Joel told her in his sessions.
In my last moment with Joel, he said he wronged you. He said I saved her.
That's breaking confidentiality, and it kind of highlights her whole point of seeing Ellie right now isn't so much to help her as to get to the bottom of what Joel meant. So inevitably Ellie lies in response to that. Later Gail labels her as a liar to Tommy.
Of course not. She's a liar.
But like, what else was she going to do in this situation? I don't think there's anything to be gained by lying exactly as Ellie. There's no clear practical reason it would be bad for Gail to know the truth about your conversation on the porch, apart from maybe the possibility she'd break confidentiality and tell someone else. But yeah, for a girl who finds it hard to trust anyway, there's no reason she would trust Gail with such a vulnerable truth. The fact that Ellie lies here is not a mark against her, and it just baffles me what Gail thought she would get out of such a short and direct conversation, especially when for the 3 months Ellie has been recovering in this hospital, this is the first time she visits. But in her defense, she doesn't do anything too harmful here, and I do enjoy some of her playful demeanour.
Well, you really are doing good.
Again, it's just a very fun scene, and I enjoy the scene. And let's keep track of this, by the way. In both Gail's scenes so far, she has failed to achieve the thing she was trying to achieve, which is getting Joel to talk and then getting Ellie to talk. The next scene isn't a session, it's just Gail trying to enjoy a game of baseball and Tommy wanting to ask some advice. And I just wanted to say I think it must be so difficult for Gail to do anything in Jackson without people asking her for help all the time. That could be exhausting. Everybody knows what her job is and there's no real private space away from it. It must be super difficult to unwind, and it's no wonder in that sense Gail isn't doing the best job. I do empathise with her, even if I also disagree with her decisions. Not only is that difficult for her though, but it also might affect her clients or the wider network as a whole. Generally, the training is that, say you're at a pub or a restaurant or something and one of your clients walks in as well, ethically you're supposed to leave. Not like run away from them, but you should avoid encroaching and socialising in a capacity that might affect the work. Gail can't do that kind of thing in Jackson because there's nowhere else to go and she deserves to be able to go somewhere. I kind of understand her defensiveness when people keep coming over. And as she herself points out, this is one reason all therapists absolutely need a supervisor.
I'm supposed to see a shrink myself, to process it all.
So yeah, she calls Ellie a liar.
Well, there's a difference between lying and being a liar.
Oh, I know. And that one? Liar.
I really don't like this at all. I think it sweeps away all context and understanding in place of a very rigid judgment that I don't think is even true. Like, if we take Gail's perspective at least on the matter, there are 3 situations we know of Gail and Ellie having some kind of interaction. This one we've just discussed where, of course, Ellie lies, and this one at the town hall where, again, of course, Ellie lies because otherwise she won't get her vote. And thirdly, where Joel lies to Gail and Ellie goes against that to tell her a very painful truth. Even a lot of very truthful people might have lied there, or at least said nothing. So I don't know, in that context, how can you be calling her a liar? It strikes me then as Gail being personally annoyed that Ellie wouldn't tell her about Joel, and she's venting about it now to Tommy, which again shows, in her own words,
A complete fucking disaster. It was maybe one person she told the truth to, and he's...
I like this line a lot because we as the audience are meant to see this is wrong. I think we're meant to question a lot of Gail's opinions. Tommy knows Ellie is immune and they've talked about that. He's been set up this season a lot more like an uncle to her. Next episode, Ellie will tell Dina the truth. Gail's comment isn't exactly correct, and it's a great line not just because Gail is incorrect, but because it highlights just how much Ellie still has the potential to grow and heal if only she can seize it. There are people she can be honest with, and healing is something Tommy wants to help her do. However, in Gail's words,
Take it from a psychotherapist of 40 years. Some people just Can't be saved.
And I mean, I do disagree with this. I think saved is an interesting choice of word because, in a way, they have to also save themselves. So she's right in a sense. And it's true there are always going to be clients you aren't able to fully help. You know, often you make some small amount of difference, but sometimes not the amount that's needed, and often there are a lot of other factors at play in why that is. Inevitably, you are not able to save everyone. No person is able to save all the people they intend to. You might not be able to save everyone, but it doesn't mean some people are just inherently beyond salvation. And that is an opinion. It's definitely one you can debate. I think there are holes to pick there. I think the argument some people inherently just can't be saved, whilst there's truth in it, we're supposed to regard this as the words of an old, very worn down therapist who's developed an understandable level of cynicism. And I can empathise exactly with why she would feel that, and sometimes it doesn't work and there isn't anything you can do, and that's not your fault. But it also doesn't mean there's some magic unbreakable curse. But I shouldn't have said all that. Maybe I'll cut it down when we get to editing the video, because my personal opinion is irrelevant here. The point is that she says this to try and convince Tommy. Just as her attempts in every other scene have failed, the same happens again here. The point is, she says this to try and convince Tommy to not invest too much in saving Ellie, and Tommy of course disagrees with this opinion and he rides out to try and save Ellie, and if anything, Gail probably motivated that decision even more. I said before, I think this question is at the heart of the story now. Are some people impossible to save? Or more specifically, can Ellie be saved? Is she doomed to lose everything on a quest half about revenge, half about purpose and self-destruction? Or can she be pulled back from that brink? So I just wanted to point out, I don't think we're meant to see Gail as good at her job. I think we're meant to recognise she has some skill and insight. Not everything she says is wrong, but she's also a bit of a mess and not a good therapist. At least not now she's in Jackson. She was probably great before the zombies and all of that. People always get annoyed in the comments when I call them zombies, but they basically are. Leave me alone. If I felt this show was portraying Gail as someone we're supposed to see as good, I'd be much more critical. However, I think we're supposed to question what she says and see the flaws in what she does. Terrible therapist, great character. She does raise the interesting question I said earlier that I didn't answer then. Is it better to give very flawed therapy to people who cannot get it anywhere else? Or should you not give therapy to anyone here unless you're able to do your absolute best? I'm intrigued by what people think about this question. I think as a choice between the two, my perspective would be no, don't do therapy if you can't do it in a fully committed, ethical way. Because there's then too much potential to harm rather than heal. I think there are other things you could be doing to help in a community that aren't as intense and vulnerable as therapy. You could be facilitating just an ordinary support groups, for example, or run some sort of classes that have a slightly therapeutic edge to them. If you were thinking long term, maybe to try and train and then supervise someone else as the therapist, although that has a lot of issues. I know I'm a bit of a purist on this point. I think because of my own life, really, you know, I currently do not take on half as much therapy work as I used to, basically because paying bills is hard, and by some unexpected turn of events, this channel kicked off and ended up paying the bills much better than anything else, and as a result having to devote more time to it. And I could have kept going with the same volume of clients alongside that, but I personally don't want to risk taking on an amount if I'm not sure I can give them all 100%. I don't want to turn up to their sessions stressed and overworked and not be able to give my best, you know? I tend to think if I can't give 100% and can't commit to that, potentially seeing them over several years, then I don't think I'm the right person. So I'm very careful with my limits nowadays, arguably too careful, and my hope is one day I earn enough from YouTube that I can afford to pay an editor and have more free time to do more therapy again. But right now I'm at a comfortable amount of clients per week. That's just my personal perspective, and I think it does inform the ways I think about Gail. So if I was the only therapist in Jackson, no, I don't think I would be offering therapy. I think I'd probably set up some kind of like creative writing group and provide something faintly therapeutic through that. This has been my video on Gail though. Let me know what you think about any of this, all of this, none of this. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe, maybe support me on Patreon or buy me a coffee, but otherwise, hopefully see you next time. And as ever, a special thank you goes to Flying Spider, Kellyanne Davidson, Luke Orr, Michael Gallagher, Benry, Joshua C. Follier, and Chad Bramwell. Thank you.